Hey y'all, I want to talk about the whole two versus Rucka saga or drama. Um, I actually began recording this last week, but what happened was I couldn't finish everything I wanted to say. I had to run to work, and then I tried to do it the second day, but then I had like technical issues, so again I couldn't finish it. Hopefully today um, I will be able to do this. And anyway, I thought an introductory video would be good. What was good about me now finishing the initial video was that going to work, I kept kind of thinking about this issue, and then I had like this sort of realization about comedy and humor. Um, so I'm going to talk about that, and basically what I'll do is I'll cut this video into two. So this first one will be about the whole fight, quote unquote, between Rucka and two, and then the second one will be about comedy and humor. I'll just let you right now know what I want to say in that video is that I think I discovered why something funny is funny, and then why man needs funny. Like, why does man need humor? So, I mean, I don't know. I'm just tiptoeing into that field. I'll put it out there and we'll see what you guys think about it. So it's an interesting theory. Um, but yeah, we'll talk about it in the next video. So first of all, I just want to reflect a little about my conversation with Rucka. It was really fun. I really enjoyed talking to him. It's really a shame that my internet connection was so awful. Hopefully, I was able to fix that. I had a technician come over, and we'll see how the internet goes in the next few days. I just wanted to say that I was really excited to do the talk for two main reasons. One is that English is my second language, so I don't speak it as well as I speak Hebrew. And even so, like even in Hebrew, my speaking skills or my verbal skills are not as good as my writing skills. So I'm a much better writer. I can express my thoughts better when I write. I can think about it and edit it and just make sure that I'm very precise. Whereas I'm still kind of trying to work on my talking skills. So that's one. And then the second is, I've been following Rucka for a long time, like 2 years or something like that. And I guess it's just kind of a weird experience when you consume so much content, and I saw so many conversations that he had, and then suddenly to actually talk to him, it's just weird, like because you kind of know it, or at least you think you know a lot about that person, but then they don't know actually anything about you. So it's just a weird kind of first impression kind of experience. But I think I was able to shake that off as the conversation grew and developed. So let's delve right into the Charles II issue. I want to begin with a Victor Hugo quote. This is from Les Mis. So he writes, "The just man frowns, but never smiles with a malicious sneer. We understand wrath, but not malice." Now, I want you to keep this sentence in mind as we delve into this issue. Okay, so first off, why am I even speaking about this subject? What happened was the day that I had the conversation with Rucka, he put out a video commenting on Garrett speaking with that Getsui guy, and I think it was like the first time that Rucka really went into this topic, really kind of in depth, and I mean, it was really personal. It was really, emotional, and I thought it was powerful. Like I thought it was really, um, I don't know, it was really interesting to watch, and obviously Rucka had some really good things to say. Um, so what happened was I kind of had that entire conversation on mind, and so I was thinking about it, and I just had some things that came up that I thought would be interesting to the objectivist community or whatever. So this is why I'm doing this. What I do want to emphasize is that I think this is not just a personal kind of, little drama in the objectivist community. I think there are questions here that are very relevant in a more generalized matter. And I want to focus on those, so I don't want to go into anything personal. Basically, I think there are principles here that are important, that are universal. They're not just about, Rucka and two. So, we'll go into that. And maybe some of you will be thinking that I'm just trying to get attention after speaking to Rucka, but, you be the objective judge. And hopefully I can, give you some value after you watch this. And if not, so I don't know. What can I say? I wasted your time. Send me your address and I'll send you a check. That doesn't really go anywhere. So for me, what happened there was that two attacked Rucka for his virtues. Okay? He did not attack Rucka for his so-called nihilism. I would even argue more than that Two's attack was nihilistic against his own intellectual virtues. Basically, taking the stance, like believing that his own virtues cannot exist on earth. That's what I think really happened here. Rucka was the one who approached Two. He noticed that Two has, very good understanding of objectivism. He realized and acknowledged that he has a lot to learn from him. I mean, this was basically like a student going to a teacher saying to him, hey, I recognize your virtues. You're very good at this intellectual stuff. I want to learn from you. There was no personal attack against Two's virtues, against his values, or any of that. And let's not also forget that Rucka continuously tried to bring up the subject of his own work, of his own comedy, trying to talk about it, trying to get some sort of objective, rational evaluation of what he's doing. And Two repeatedly, either ignored or evaded or just kind of dodged that bullet. So then when he finally did talk about Rucka's work, I mean, it was basically like throwing everything, the entire context, like their relationship. I mean, I'm not saying, they were best friends or anything like that, but there is some sort of relationship that, that developed there. And to just kind of throw Rucka under the bus, just to completely dismiss his entire work, to call it just nihilist filth. I mean, I don't think it's objective. I don't think it's rational. I think it's just not a right way of approaching it. I mean, I don't think Ayn Rand would do that to someone. I mean, at least not in that context. I mean, I just want to be very clear here. Like, I'm not a fan of Rucka's work. Like, I'm just not a fan of parody, and it's not really my thing. So I don't really know what would be an objective evaluation of his work. Like, I'm a fan of his Rucka Reacts channel, and I haven't seen too much of what he does other than that channel. So, but I mean, obviously Rucka, he does engage with millions of people. His videos reach out, they speak values to some people. You can't just throw the entire thing and say it's just nihilist. I mean, let's say, because I'm not a huge fan of popular music. So if you just ask me off the cuff, what do I think of, I don't know, let's say Beyonce, I would probably just say that it's trash. But if you actually, if you really go into that, if you really delve into that, so obviously she does have some value. I mean, I don't know, she's a good singer. Her songs, maybe they have good hooks. Maybe the production value is really great and rational. And I mean, there are obviously things there that do work from an objective perspective. From a, it does trade value with people. Think about it, there must be millions of wannabe Beyoncés out there, and they can't do it. Why can't they do it? Well, objectively speaking, their values are not, they don't create good values such as Beyonce. So, I mean, I'm not, not equating Rucka with Beyonce, but just to make a point. So, obviously, he is very productive and he is putting things out there that speak to the people. And again, so I'm being redundant, but I don't think Rucka's, I don't think Two's evaluation was even rational in that regard, or objective. And in the next video, I will go a little bit into comedy and how I think you should judge it objectively. So again, so to just push Rucka away like that, to just basically throw away everything they built together, and in a manner that he did it. So it's not even so much of what he said, it's the way he said it and the way he just dismissed everything. I mean, you could tell that there's no rational conversation there. It's very emotional. There was something very emotional there. And when you do that, when you throw off someone who basically comes to you and he wants to gain values from you, you are basically pushing yourself. You are pushing your own virtues. You're saying, I don't want my virtues to go out there in the world and be successful. I don't want to, it's kind of like not wanting to be successful, not wanting to engage and see your ideas spread and reach the people and do the effect that they can. So what can objectivism do with the world today? Should objectivism just say, oh, this world, everybody's just nihilistic, and objectivism is like the best philosophy out there, so we should just throw everyone under the bus. We should just not care about anyone else. I mean, I'm not talking about caring like in the altruistic sense. I'm talking about trading values. So we just say, oh, no, I'm not trading value with you because you're a nihilist. Like, I don't want to talk to you. I mean, it doesn't make sense. The approach itself is nihilistic. It rejects the good. It rejects the good for being the good. It is saying that if you want my intellectual value, if you want something that's good that I'm doing, because you have other things in your life that I think are bad, I wanna do anything. I mean, obviously, like if it was a murderer or a criminal or something like that, then yeah, you can maybe say, look, I'm not sanctioning that. But if it's just people who come from this philosophical different background and do other things in their life, you don't just push them away. That does not make any sense. So I read this, What is Capitalism? From Rand's Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal. And she brings up this topic, which I think is very clarifying for this situation. So she talks about the difference between a philosophically objective value and a socially objective value. So she says that a philosophically objective value means a value estimated from the standpoint of the best possible to man, i.e., by the criterion of the most rational mind possessing the greatest knowledge in a given category, in a given period, and in a defined context. Nothing can be estimated in an undefined context. So let's say 2 has this great intellectual, philosophically objective value. So it may be lower than your objective, philosophically higher value. It could be. But again, like Ayn Rand says, everything is in a context. So while I also think he did not evaluate Rucka's work rationally, he also forgot that there is a difference between philosophically objective value and a social objective value. So basically, like, people have their own values, and if they don't have your knowledge, if they don't have your context of knowledge, if they don't have your let's call it a superior knowledge and moral values. So they might not be at your level, but that does not mean that you push them away when they when they see your value and they acknowledge it, they recognize it, and they want to learn more. They want to know, okay, so how can I reach your values? How can I be, how can I advance myself, everything in my life? How can I be a more integrated human being? How can I raise my level of gain? This is why I also thought, because there is a problem. I mean, we are living in a very peculiar time where you have objectivism being this basically the best philosophy ever conceived in human history, okay? And the prevalent, culturally out there, the prevalent philosophical ideas are basically the worst. I don't know if you can say objectively the worst in human history, but they are definitely really, 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 really bad. So there's a question: how do we as objectivists, how does objectivism go out there to the culture, and spread its message? We're not living in the 19th century. Reality is what it is. So you have a culture that, yes, it is more nihilistic. It is more hedonistic. It's skeptical. This is just reality, and this is what you have to deal with. So even if you are at the level of the highest philosophically, objective standard, you still have to go down to the people, down in quotes. Like, you have to go down there and in a way speak their language. You have to. I'm not saying you have to be vulgar. I'm not saying you have to do all these things, but you can't be intrinsic about it. Okay, there's not going to be. I mean, you're talking about art. There's not going to be a Victor Hugo today. I mean, I don't think it's possible in today's culture to witness, an author as great as Victor Hugo. So there's like the whole notion of like there are no people like me out there. That is just ignoring existence. That is like saying I have a right to live in a culture that is so like high and so objectively superior to what it is today. That is just irrational. It's not. It can't work. It can't work in the world today. And just to be clear here, I mean, I'm not saying that Charles II is like the Victor Hugo of philosophers today or anything like that. I think, obviously, I don't think anyone would object to this or would deny this. I think he has a great intellect. His knowledge of objectivism is one of the best out there. But he still needs to be productive. He still needs to go out there. He needs to talk to people, engage. He needs to write his first book. I mean, this would be like Victor Hugo before writing his first book. I don't know, maybe he has like an entire plot in his head and he's like, I'm the best author out there, but I don't want to write it because you're all just nihilists. So you can't build up your confidence in that way. You need to actually engage, write. You need the empirical evidence as well as the rational evidence. So you can't just rely on your mind without actually going out there and applying what you have in your mind. So you have to earn it. Okay, so we're getting into the meat of this video right now. I mean, it's important for me to say that, I value Charles II's work a lot. I mean, I've learned a lot about objectivism thanks to II. I still go to his videos when I try to, figure things out. And I don't want this war between him and Rucka to continue. I mean, I don't know where he went. I don't know what's going on with him, but I do hope he comes back. I hope he betters himself. I think we all have something to gain from him. Just as rational human beings, we want other human beings to be rational and to give us all values. So we have nothing to gain from a war or something like that. So the main reason I wanted to do this video is because I can really relate to II. I mean, I think psychologically, at least, I think I kind of know where he's coming from, because I've experienced the same thing. Like, I used to have more problems with communicating with other people, and I still do. It's still a process. It's still something that I'm working on. And basically, what I want to say is why, like, I think I know where his difficulties come from, and I want to delve into that. So, Ayn Rand's Romantic Manifesto, she has this article, she has this chapter called Art and Moral Treason. Okay, it's chapter 9 in the book. And I remember reading it a few years ago, and it was just really, I mean, it really struck me home. Like, it struck me, I felt like she was talking exactly about me in certain ways, explaining a lot of my issues, of my problems, of my resentment, of, you know, my anger and difficulties and all of that. And so let's read the first, like, just how she begins this chapter. When I saw Mr. X for the first time, I thought that he had the most tragic face I had ever seen. It was not the mark left by some specific tragedy, not the look of a great sorrow, but a look of desolate hopelessness, weariness, and resignation that seemed left by the chronic pain of many lifetimes. He was 26 years old. He had a brilliant mind, an outstanding scholastic record in the field of engineering, a promising start in his career, and no energy to move further. He was paralyzed by so extreme a state of indecision that any sort of choice filled him with anxiety, even the question of moving out of an inconvenient apartment. He was stagnating in a job which he had outgrown and which had become a dull, uninspiring routine. He was so lonely that he had lost the capacity to know it. He had no concept of friendship, and his few attempts at a romantic relationship had ended disastrously, and he could not tell why. So, later in the chapter, she explains how a child needs a moral guidance in his life, okay? So he needs an ideal. And usually she says the ideal is in art. So that's where you get your ideal of what kind of man you want to be. So she goes in the translation of that ideal into conscious philosophical terms and into his actual practice. A child needs intellectual assistance, or at least a chance to find his own way. In today's culture, he is given neither. The battering which his precarious, unformed, barely glimpsed moral sense of life receives from parents, teachers, adult authorities, and little second-hander goons of his own generation is so intense and so evil that only the toughest hero can withstand it. So evil that of the many sins of adults toward children, this is the one for which they would deserve to burn in hell if such a place existed. I mean, that is that is some really intense stuff. Like, that is a total condemnation of culture. And I just want to say about this line here. I mean, if even Ayn Rand can be so angry, so resentful towards, toward the culture, toward people, you can understand, I think, why that same sentiment would be placed in other people. But I think we should also remember that Ayn Rand is also an artist. She's not just a philosopher. So when she writes, things like that, I think it's pretty obvious. You don't need to take it literally. This is kind of a, kind of a prose way of getting the point out there. But yeah, I mean, there is a lot of resentment here, and it is difficult when you grow up in such a society. Okay, so she continues. Every form of punishment, from outright prohibition to threats to anger to condemnation to crass indifference to mockery, is unleashed against the child at the first signs of his romanticism, which means at the first signs of his emerging sense of moral values. Life is not like that, and come down to earth are the catchphrases which best summarize the motives of the attackers, as well as the view of life and of this earth which they seek to inculcate. So I can say about myself, as someone who always had this reverence for values, for principles, whenever I try to like say anything about that, whenever I try to engage the culture, other people with my idea that, you know, yes, you can achieve your values, you can go out there and be the moral person you want to be, it was always met with just complete and utter, you know, decimation. Like, and and that is very difficult. And I'm assuming that you know, Tu is also like that. So she continues, and this is the most important part. The child who withstands it and damns the attackers, not himself and his values, is a rare exception. Think about Howard Roark. Think about Ayn Rand. These are the people who can withstand it, who can just, as she says, damn the attackers. I'm sticking to my values. I'm sticking to my principles, and I'm just going with them. And to hell with the world. Now, she continues. The child who merely suppresses his values, avoids communication, and withdraws into a lonely private universe is almost as rare. I'll repeat that. The child who merely suppresses his values, avoids communication, and withdraws into a lonely private universe is almost as rare. So, this to me is the essence of it. This is what, I mean, I can just tell it from my experience. Like, I don't know what went on with Tu, with his growing up, with how he engaged with the world, but I can definitely tell you that this was me. I never renounced my values, never renounced my principles. I mean, I didn't know what they were, but I always believed that they existed. And what happened was that I did. You know, I went into my own little world, and I just kept them inside my consciousness, and that can cause so much anger, so much resentment toward everything, toward people, toward the world, which can form, I guess, this other type of nihilism, which is kind of thinking like, oh, I can never actually achieve my values. And that is very, very dangerous. And let me just finish this, and then we'll continue. And then she goes, in most cases, the child represses his values and gives up. He gives up the entire realm of valuing, of value choices and judgments, without knowing that what he is surrendering is morality. So I think this is what happens to most people. You know, they surrender everything. They forgo of their values, anything that they thought is kind of, you know, worth to fight for, and then they just go through this kind of nihilistic hedonist phase where they just, you know, they don't care anymore. And then I think for those people who discover objectivism, they kind of have an advantage, because it's like they're starting from scratch, they're starting from zero, and they're just building up their moral character step by step. So you would go out there, you would pursue a value, and even if you get society, you know, attacking it, you now have all of your objectivist knowledge. Like, you know that you shouldn't care about them, you know, you should not be a second-hander. And you just, and again, it's the first time, so you gain that value, and then you're gaining another one. And it's like, it's sort of like these baby steps where you can do it in a proper way without the culture bringing you down. And look, I mean, I'm sure that even for those people, it would be a difficult task. Like, you would still have to deal with people reacting in a bad way. And I mean, this is difficult. But I think if you try to do that from the perspective of someone who suppressed his values, not completely repressed them and renounced them, okay? If you just suppress your values for a very, very long time, you held them in a very high regard, and then you go out there and you try to implement those values, your defense mechanism, okay, your psychological defense mechanism is so strong. You are so defendant. You're so you're just so defendant of your values that at the slightest sign of any like little attack, you might just go berserk. I think that before the whole thing exploded between Tu and Rucka, I believe Tu mentioned that he was going off drinking, and maybe, I mean, I don't know. I never had that kind of problem myself, but I would imagine that this could lead to kind of looking into reevaluating things. And so maybe he just had this thing going on in his mind where he's like, oh, maybe Rucka is actually laughing about me, maybe he's not respectful enough, and maybe all these things. It just, I mean, obviously there's no empirical evidence for that. That is not real, but it's probably something that happened to him. And that resentment probably, it developed, and it grew into this huge thing and then exploded, as we all saw. So this is a problem. I think the only solution is to be as rational as you can be. Remember that it is a difficult task when you held these values, and you upheld them for so long, and they're, you cherish them, they're sacred to you, and then you go out there in the culture. You need to remember that even if it is like a philosophically higher value, you are engaging with people who have lesser values. And again, I'm not saying that was the situation, but just from a general perspective here. So you need to remember that you are engaging with people who may not have your values, and it might take time, and you have to apply it, okay? There needs to be an empirical application in reality. And this is going to take time, and you're going to have some setbacks, and you're going to have, maybe problems of communication, but you have to be honest about this. You have to, very importantly, not be second-handed, put your values out there, and don't be scared if they're attacked. In a sense, you need to understand that even if you held these values for so long, and even if you had this really positive outlook on life and about principles, and you cherish these values and you hold them, sacredly, and you held them for so long, you are still making baby steps. Once you decide to go out there in the culture and put your values out there, these are your first baby steps. So you might be the most brilliant person alive. You are still, in a sense, you're nothing. Like, you didn't do anything with, all that knowledge that you had, or all that sense of life, or whatever that you have inside you. You need to go out there and, for the first time, actually, do something with it. So I think, Tu did that, but he, his being kind of obnoxious, his being malicious toward people, like, saying how they can't construct questions, or just calling people stupid and all that. That is a defense mechanism, because he holds his values so high. So he's like, okay, so I'm gonna have this. I'm just gonna like push everyone away so they cannot hurt me at all. So I'll just call everybody stupid. Like, if you can actually think about this in a rational sense, if you understand that, yes, I held these values for a very long time, and the culture was really bad. It didn't let me develop in a way that I wanted to. You need to remember that A, the culture doesn't owe you anything, and B, you didn't do it. You didn't go out there and try to achieve your values. So this is the first time. These are, again, I'm saying these are baby steps. This is the first time you're doing it. You need to apply yourself. So in a sense, I don't want to say that you need to be modest, but yeah, you don't need to be, with your head stuck up in your ass. And look, this can be difficult for objectivists, because, like I said, we do have this amazing philosophy, and everybody out there, they have the worst ideas, but it would be ignoring reality to suggest that you're just this, I don't know, angel that fell from the sky, and you can just teach everyone what's good and what's bad, you still need to gain experience. That's why I think, philosophers do need to be. I mean, you can't be a philosopher unless you are 40, because I think you do need to experience different things in life, and gain all this empirical evidence that you actually see with your senses and all of that. So, just to end on a positive note, I do hope that Charles too comes back. I hope that he improves himself. I hope that, I don't know, he might watch this video, and I hope he'll take it in the right way. I don't, like, for me, I would like to meet him one day. Um, maybe get him out of his resentful funk, or at least try to help in a way. I would like to see more conversations between him and Rucka. Um, Obviously, I understand if Rucka would, not want to do that, but I guess my point is that, we can only gain from someone who betters himself. And, like, as rational people, we don't want, the demise of any person. We don't want anyone to suffer, or to be bad. We want good in the world. So, I'll just end it on this note, and see what you guys think. And then next week I will put up a video about comedy. So I think that will be interesting for you all.